Hello, Neve.
Hiya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. The sun is shining in Cardiff, so it's hopefully going to be a good day. I was just thinking, Neve, you finished with us last July, didn't you? July
Y-
2023.
Yeah, I think so.
I
Think
feel
around then.
it feels like yesterday.
It does. It really does.
It's nearly a year ago, and I'm just thinking,
Uh,
where does
I
time
know.
go?
I know. I can't believe that actually. That a year ago I was still doing my apprenticeship. It's a bit crazy.
I mean, to be fair to you, you had a busy year, didn't you, when you started on your apprenticeship with us on the crew apprenticeship?
Oh yeah. I was quite lucky with my apprenticeship. I kind of went from job to job to job, which not it doesn't happen that often. But thankfully, work in Wales, it was everything seemed to be coming up and not stopping that year, so it was great. So I think I got my first placement in September, and
Wow.
that was with Four Stories,
Yeah.
and we were based near Penarth, really, down the bay, and that was a great first job because it was 6 weeks. It was three different short episodes, really, like 20-minute, 30-minute episodes, each with a different story, and it was a small production as well. So it was a great first one to be on because it really, like, I hadn't worked in the industry before.
Right.
I literally worked in hospitality mainly. I mean, I went to uni at Swansea, did media there, but that was all like media theory and film and all that sort of stuff. So I had no idea what it was like to work in the industry.
Right.
Um, and when I started, it was like a great stepping stone for me because everyone on that production was lovely and
Yeah.
they were very much guided me through it and taught me how to do things that actually a lot of other productions that I've been on haven't really had the time just because they've been so big to show me. So being on a small production is really, really nice.
Yeah, I bet because it's a vast industry. It's huge. There's a lot to learn, isn't there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've still got so much to learn now.
Uh, I say myself, I'm 50, just turned 54, and you learn something every day. You never stop
Oh yeah.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like on the apprenticeship, all the jobs that I had got were all TV, and now for some reason I'm not sure why a lot of features are coming into Wales,
Mm.
and now I'm currently working, like, I've finished The Man in My Basement, which was a feature, and then I jumped onto Scurry, which was a feature. So it's like it seems a lot of films now are starting to be made, which is quite interesting to learn about.
Yeah, I bet. Just different mediums and stuff as well, isn't
Hmm.
it? So,
Oh yeah.
take me back to so you mentioned you briefly mentioned there that Swansea University.
Hmm.
Did you finish your course at Swansea Uni?
Yes. Yeah. So I was at Swansea for 3 years. Unfortunately, my second and third year was in the peak of COVID. Um, so there was a bit of uncertainty whether or not we were going back or what was happening with our course because a lot of lecturers were actually had to cancel courses because a lot
Right.
of students weren't going back. Um, and I think I only got hit really I got hit halfway through my second year with COVID when
Right.
everything locked down, but it didn't affect me as much as it had other people. So I was very lucky in that sense. Just because it only meant that instead of doing exams, I was doing essays and assessments. The only issue was the library was closed. But
Oh,
uh, so yeah, so and then in my third year, they started to open everything back up again, but obviously with like the house rules of like you can only be with the people you live with, or you can only be in like your bubble. So if it's your house and another house, um, but I did manage to have a job
right.
at uni, again, work in hospitality.
Mm.
Because Swansea Uni, I think they were the only uni in Wales to actually do a outside freshers week.
Oh,
So
right,
we
okay.
so they set up a marquee with a bunch of benches and chairs and whatever, and on because it's Singleton campus and Bay campus, so they did it on both campuses, and it was basically an outdoor like pub really.
Right,
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, so and then I think Christmas was then when in my third year when COVID started back up again, and I actually didn't return to uni until the March of
Oh, right, okay.
because um it was the local lockdowns, so I couldn't then go back to Swansea after Christmas until they had lifted the lockdowns. But thankfully, I managed to finish my course.
Can I sort of ask,
Um,
I was going to ask, I know that you live sort of on the outskirts of Cardiff, and
yeah,
I was wondering, did you travel back and forth to Swansea? But obviously you lived in, which was great.
yeah. So I lived at Swansea,
Yeah.
and then obviously it was easy for me because I was lucky enough to have my own car at the time, so I could travel back and forth if I needed to, especially when the like the local lockdowns were happening because I think my mum was like, please come home because she was
Yeah.
like, I don't want you stuck in Swansea if you can't come back. So, um, but it came really in handy in the summer when everything reopened and I could just drive back and forth when I needed to. But majority of the time I stayed in Swansea because
Yeah.
it's like I had a really nice house, thankfully a really nice landlord, and all my flatmates were great. So yeah, it was really good.
So even though your university time was interrupted a little bit with COVID,
Mm.
how did you find living out? Did you enjoy the experience?
Oh yeah, no, I loved it.
Mm.
I really enjoyed it. The first year I was in um a 17 person flat.
Oh my gosh.
So it's literally like an entire floor. And then we had one small kitchen for all of us. Um, and there was only one boy, the rest were all girls. Um, which I don't know how that happened because the floor above us was all boys and they had one girl, so they definitely messed up.
Oh
They definitely messed up somewhere. But I was semi-catered, so I had like a dining card that you paid for as well as your accommodation. And I think you had a certain amount on it for the year, and we could just spend it around campus, which was really
no.
nice.
Great. Yeah.
Um, uh, and I actually had money left over on the dining card, and I went up to the uni and I was like, "Oh, is there any way to get this money back? Because we've already paid for it." And they were like, "Oh no, you can't have it back. You're just gonna have to spend it."
Oh.
So I actually me and my friends went to all of the like coffee shops, and there's a Taliesin, which is a theatre on campus. We went to all those places and basically asked them, could we buy their stock, like crates of Coke, um, crates of like sweets, boxes
Amazing.
of chocolate, and they were like, yeah, that's fine. And so I managed to make my money worth and just buy um, all the snacks on campus.
I thought you were going to say you opened your own tuck box tuck shop then.
No, no. But
So,
yeah, no, it was great.
so while you were studying at Swansea University, was there anything in your on the course, so to speak, that sort of was leading you to working on television and film or on production?
Yeah, so when I originally went into the idea that I was going to study journalism. I had done a couple work experiences for a newspaper and I absolutely loved it. It was great. And I was speaking to the editor and he said to me, um, don't go to uni and do journalism. And I was like, oh, okay. He was like, go to uni and do media. And
Uh,
then you can do journalism within that. and then you might find that you hate it and you don't want to do it, and you might want to do something else. And so I was like, okay, that's really good advice. I'll take that up. So I decided to do media, and you're given a certain amount of options that you can do in your different semesters. And I think my first semester I did creative writing, film theory, and I think I had a compulsory media theory module. And the film theory is where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I was like, I want to be able to work in the industry, just even after just doing it for the year. I was like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do journalism. I did do journalism modules at the uni just to see if that was something I still wanted to do, if I couldn't get into the industry. And I just realized it wasn't really for me. Just the writing style and a lot of it, I just don't think I would have been that great at it. So I was like, no, the industry is where I want to go. And when I finished uni, I was like, how do I do it? Do I get into the industry? So
how did you find out about Crew? Had you seen an advert, or was it on socials? Or?
Yeah, so when I finished uni, I went straight into hospitality because I was like, oh, I'll just make a couple quid, because I thought that I was going to go traveling. Actually, my goal was I'll work for 6 months and then I'll go traveling for a couple months, and then come back and then figure out what I was going to do. But obviously, because COVID was still quite severe, they were still doing you had to get PCR tests anytime you flew, and you had to get PCR tests any country you went into, and it was actually working out to cost more to do the tests than it was to get the flights. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So I was like, I'll just work in hospitality, see how that goes, and then I'll try and look online to see if there's anything going to work in the industry. And so I joined a couple Facebook groups. I think there's one, runners, UK runners, I think there's a Welsh runners as one as well. So I joined those, and loads of people were posting for like, oh, can we have someone to drive a van for a day and all this sort of stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of people were looking for someone who was over the age of 25 due to insurance and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll just work up until Christmas. And by January, I was like, okay, I really need to figure out how I'm going to get into the industry. And luckily enough, my mum has friends of hers that know someone at the BBC, and they managed to get him to get in touch with me to have a meeting. And so I spoke to him. He gave me a tour around BBC in Cardiff, and he told me about all the apprenticeships that the BBC were doing. And so he was like, it would be best for me to try and get on one of those. So luckily a BBC apprenticeship came up. I applied. Unfortunately, I didn't get in. But I was like, okay, apprenticeship is the way to go. So I just started Googling all TV industry apprenticeships, and then I found Sgil Cymru. And when I first found it, the applications were closed. So I thought I'd missed it. And then a couple months later, I saw a Facebook post that said Sgil Cymru Crew apprenticeship has just reopened. And I was like, oh my God, I have to apply. So that's kind of how it happened. I literally applied, and it was very quick. I think I applied, and then a week later I heard from you guys to do a workshop, and did the workshops, had a one-on-one, and then lucky enough you guys emailed and said that you wanted to speak to me, and you guys gave me the job. And then it was literally like, okay, and you start next week. I was like, oh my God, amazing.
I know, because obviously, did you realise when you'd applied for the BBC apprenticeship that had you got a place on their apprenticeship, you would have been coming to us for the qualification
I
part?
didn't. I didn't until I had started with you. I didn't know that you had BBC cohorts until I started with you guys on crew.
Yeah, it's sort of like not a dirty secret at all, but
No.
it's the way that so we've always worked hand in hand with BBC, ITV, Real SFX, and a lot of companies, and we always call sort of the BBC apprenticeships like the one job apprenticeship, and what we were trying to adopt, obviously with crew, which is our own apprenticeship, which is the same framework, but we run it. Was to give people more of an insight of how their careers would really be if they were a freelancer.
Yeah, which is very
useful
for me.
Yeah, it's the main difference, but that's the main difference between both the job rather than the framework. You've got first-hand experience now. You can tell me really if that what it was for you.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'd never worked to think of myself as a freelancer, like when I started, was like, oh my God, I don't think so. Like, because I'd only worked, in permanent jobs, and especially in hospitality. Yes, they have 0-hour contracts, so it's kind of like you're just called upon when they need you. But to think like, oh no, you got to go out and you got to go find the work, and it was a bit daunting. But then when I did my first job in the September and I met all these people, I didn't realize how quickly you would make the contacts to then help you for the next job. Because, I worked with John Williams and Catherine, and, they still keep, I've had, they've asked me to jump on things to help them. And then when I jumped onto Black Cake, I'm still in touch with Brian Moses. Kath gave me my first job after I finished with the apprenticeship, which I'm very grateful for. After being a trainee, she gave me a runner job. So I didn't realize how many contacts I would make so quickly, and how useful it is to just keep in touch with them, even just by slipping them a WhatsApp message, being like, oh, how are you doing? What's going on? What are you up to? Even now, I worked on the way with Bailey, who was the APOC at the time. She's now a coordinator, and she's offered me a project job for Mr Burton, which starts in a couple of weeks. Fantastic. So it's all those contacts. I had no idea that, I would make them so quickly, and I'm so grateful, because I wouldn't have been able to be a freelancer without that. I don't think I could have been a trainee on my own, because I wouldn't have been able to find the niche jobs that would have helped me get, the contacts that I have now. Yeah,
exactly. I suppose in a way with our recruitment as well, it was all pretty quick. In a way, a little bit as if you were being employed as a freelancer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%.
Which we tried to do the workshop, the interviews, and then the start date. Pretty soon, because I do know with some companies their recruitment process can be as long as 9 months, which is pretty long for anybody.
Oh yeah.
So I do feel that we're a bit more realistic at Sgil Cymru, where we recruit, workshop, interview, and then you start with us within the month, which is a bit more realistic of how it will be for you,
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, when I finished The Man in My Basement, I had like a week off, and I wasn't really looking for anything, but then Reen, who I'd worked with on Gen Z, contacted me, and he said, do you want to start on Scurry and help us out for a little bit? And literally he messaged me on the Monday, and then the week after I started with him on the Monday. Like, it was that quick. So it's just how it works.
Yeah, definitely. So run me through, Neve. So you started off in September, you mentioned, at 4 Stories, doing short dramas.
Yeah.
What was your role with 4 Stories?
So I was production trainee. So I worked within the production office.
Okay. And then where did you go next?
So after 4 Stories, I think I finished just before the end of October.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a week, and then I started Black Cake.
Was that a far bigger production than the 4 Stories?
Much bigger. So I worked in the production office. We had 2 production trainees, 2 production runners, 2 production secretaries, 2 APOCs, and a coordinator, and a production manager and a unit production manager. It was huge compared to 4 Stories, where 4 Stories was literally line producer, coordinator, APOC, and a trainee.
Wow.
So it was massive.
Can I ask, what did you prefer, the smaller production or the larger, or do they offer you different things really?
So there's definitely more to do on a smaller production. Obviously I was a trainee at the time, so it's different, I guess, if you're a runner, because there's definitely more work for you to do than if you're on a bigger production. But when I was a trainee, I definitely preferred the smaller jobs, just because people kind of had to rely on you a little bit more, and it meant that you had a bit more responsibility. And like, I loved working on Black Cake because it opened my eyes to how big productions can get. And especially in a studio. Obviously on 4 Stories it was all location, whereas Black Cake was studio and location. And to see the sets built in the studio was insane. So it was really interesting to see how the bigger productions work, and see the call sheets and the schedule and the amount of essays they had, and all that sort of stuff. So but yeah, I find especially if you're wanting to work in production office, I think starting as a production trainee, the smaller jobs are really useful. Do like 1 or 2 big jobs for sure, but if you can get on a smaller job, that's probably perfect, because then they'll have to give you something to do, and they'll also teach you as well. They have more time to teach you about things, whereas the bigger jobs, they move so quickly that it's quite difficult to keep up sometimes, because it's like, oh no, we're moving this day to this day, and there's a lot of switching and changing, whereas the smaller jobs, due to having smaller budget, they don't really have the chance to move many things around. So I find the smaller jobs much nicer.
So Black Cake came and went. How long were you on that for? Was that up until the Christmas?
Yeah, so we went till February. They asked me to stay to do an extra week of wrap. So I did that, and it was literally just packing down the office and sending out wrap gifts and all that sort of stuff. And then I had a solid month off, really, to do my apprenticeship coursework kind of stuff, which was really useful, because a lot of people were very much ahead of me in the sense of finishing all their work, whereas I was quite behind, because I had obviously jumped from job to job, and they've been both quite, well, not long, but had been lengthy, in the sense that I was finishing the apprenticeship in July, and we were now in February. And it was a bit like, oh God, there's quite a lot to do. So having that month to just finish everything, because then after that, because I was going to go, I forgot about this, I was going to go on to Risen with Sky, but unfortunately they got cancelled. And actually that was probably the best thing for me, because it meant that I had that month to, get all my work done. And then I jumped onto the Way in April. So by the time I got onto the Way, I had already finished the majority of all my coursework. So I didn't really have to worry about it because the Way went right up until the last day of my apprenticeship, I think. I think I had 2 days that was like, these are your 2 days to finish everything for the apprenticeship before you're done. So I was so thankful to have that month where I could just get everything done.
Of course, and to be fair to you, you'd had in those prior months, you'd had a lot of experience,
Oh
experience
yeah,
that you could write about and talk about in your assessments.
yeah. No, it was great. It was, yeah, it was. I was quite lucky, especially to be on such a big job like Black Cake that
Mm.
to talk about that. I mean, I could have only just talked about that and it would have been fine. So
Yes.
yeah, I've been quite lucky.
And then, so you finished your apprenticeship. You finished on the way. Um, was it a bit daunting, or did you think, no, this is going to be all right? I've made a lot of contacts. I think
A
there's
little,
work out there for me.
yeah, a little bit. So I think we had 3 weeks left of the way, and everyone was starting to apply for other jobs. And obviously, I didn't really know where to start because I wasn't sure what jobs were coming up. I didn't know who was in pre-production. And luckily enough, Kira, the coordinator I was working for on the way, knew a production manager
Mm-hmm.
who was starting a job literally the same time as Gen Z.
Right.
And Kira was like, "Oh, you should apply," and she was like, "I can look at your CV, like send an email." And I was like, "Okay, sure." So I did, and thankfully enough, production manager came back and was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to speak with you." And then I got a text from Kath, who I'd worked with on Black Cake. She texted me and said, I'm doing this zombie series. Can you send me a CV?" So I sent it over with a little cover email, really, of what I'd been doing on the apprenticeship and what I really wanted to learn, and had an interview with her and Reen while I was working on the way, and didn't really hear anything. She was like, "Oh, we just need to speak to the line producer to make sure that everything's good." And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." Um, and then didn't really hear anything, so I was like, "Yeah, I'll keep applying for other things." And the BBC, obviously, casualty is big in Cardiff,
Yeah.
so a job came up for casualty, and I applied for that. The application for that was a bit daunting because it very much wasn't just send your CV. It was very much I had to fill out an application.
Right.
And they got in touch and was like, "Oh, are you free for an interview?" And literally that day when they emailed, Kath had rung me and said, "We'd love to have you. When can you start?"
Oh,
So yeah, so it was fab. So I managed to. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to stay with Gen Z." Worked with Kath before. Dan, who I'd worked with on Black Cake when he was a trainee, was also on it. Daisy, who I'd met on Black Cake, was on it as well. So it was like a familiar team. And Sam as
lovely.
well, who was the travel and the com coordinator. I knew majority of the team before I even started, so it was quite nice to go onto that one because
You knew a lot of people.
yeah. So yeah, I jumped onto Gen Z, and that was 8 months,
Fantastic.
which was amazing.
What happened with your casualty? I mean, did you still apply, or did you just have to leave it
So
alone? Really?
yeah, so they casualty emailed me for an interview, but unfortunately, I did say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but I've been accepted on another production."
Mm.
And they did say, "Oh, make sure to keep in touch." But I do check on. I get their newsletter, BBC Jobs newsletter every so often, where they send all the jobs that are open for applications, and I do check on there quite a bit
Yeah.
just to see if anything comes up. But unfortunately, nothing has at the moment. So, but yeah,
So there you go. So realistically, a huge 8 months on Gen Z,
yeah.
which goes to show in a way that it's not all bit, it's not a few weeks here, a few weeks there, is it really?
No, not always. Like getting a long job is great because you have that stability. You know that, okay, I've got work tomorrow. Whereas the smaller jobs, it's like, okay, I've only got 6 weeks. You kind of already trying to think ahead to when you need to apply for the next one. Whereas Gen Z, I really didn't have to worry about that until the last like couple weeks of the job.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, and I would have been there longer if it hadn't have been for the man in my basement.
Right.
So a job, I applied to be prod sec for the man in my basement, but I was also open to be the runner if they needed, because
Right.
I was still very, I mean, I was still new to the industry. I still wanted to learn. So I didn't mind being a runner and learning about what you needed to do to be a prod sec,
Yeah.
because I was like, I really kind of just want to be given more responsibility. And they put a message in a WhatsApp group that is with loads of people for to work in production in Wales. I think it literally called Production Cymru or something, like TV Production Cymru or something like that.
Right.
But they put a message in there, said they were looking for a runner. I emailed Emery, and who was the coordinator, and he replied and was like, please, can I just have a quick chat with you? I was like, yeah, of course. Had a chat with him, and he basically was like, when can you start? And I was like, oh my God. And he was like, can you start like as soon as possible? And so that meant I had to speak to Reem and just say that I wouldn't be able to do the couple weeks of wrap, and so they got a different runner in to finish the pack up the office and send any post that needs to be sent. And then did the man in my basement until February.
Fantastic. So you know when you had to wrap up with Gen Z early, did you feel bad about having to do that, or is this the way it is in the industry?
I definitely felt guilty because it literally, I had like a day to wrap up everything that I was doing.
Okay.
But because we were all quite ahead of ourselves on Gen Z.
Right.
I didn't feel that I was rushing to get things done. I obviously had to do my expense forms and all that to make sure those were all done before I left, which that took a bit of time. But I didn't feel like all the paperwork that we had done was behind, because we were all so on top of it that it was all ready in our what were we using at the time? I think we were using Box. It was all there and on file. We had copies of everything. It wasn't like anyone was looking for anything.
No.
And so I definitely did feel guilty, but it didn't feel like they felt like they could handle it with me gone. And also Reem said to me, he said, you got to take any opportunity you can. So he was like, you got to take it. And so I'm really glad I did take it, because I learned so much on the man in my basement. But yeah, it is kind of how this industry works, that there will be a job that pops up that might be better than the one that you're on.
Yeah,
and it does come down to whether you want to stay, or you want to work on a job that you think, oh, I'll be on that for longer, or but it's really, you just got to make that decision yourself. Only you can figure that out. So you just got to weigh everything up and see what works for you.
And I bet doing it for the first time is the worst time in a way. You know now that it can be expected.
Yeah,
You're going to jump onto another job. Reem's probably done it himself, and it's just that first time thing, isn't it? I don't want to upset anyone.
But no, everyone on Gen Z was so lovely and was congratulating me, and so I felt guilty, but I knew that they all didn't mind. It was just me who felt guilty.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Tell me about your working hours, Neve. What are your hours like? Are you doing like 12-hour days and stuff?
So it depends. I think we're all contracted 10 hours. And then it could be 10 hours plus one plus one.
Right.
So the shoot hours are very different. So like when I work in prep, that's very much start at 8 and finish at 6 or 7.
Right.
And that's pretty consistent through prep, depending on if it's the last day of prep when you've got to load everything onto the truck or the production truck, or if it's the production meeting, or if it's the read through. I think only a couple times in prep I had to stay longer just to make sure everything was ready for the read through the next day or ready for the production meeting the next day and things like that. But shoot hours are very different. So if I was, a lot of the time I was doing the rushes. So that would mean me starting later in the day, but it would also mean I would be finishing later. So especially on nights. So say if on the way we did a lot of nights. So there was one day where the shoot hours were maybe 12 till 10, 12 till 11. But obviously I would start at 1 and then I would wait for the rushes, which could take up to 1 to 2 hours. And then I'd drive to Gorilla and take it back. So then I wouldn't finish till like, maybe I wouldn't get home to maybe 1 in the morning or something like that.
How do you find that?
I didn't mind it just because I had done a lot of that in hospitality before.
Of course.
Where I'd worked 15-hour days on my feet, no break. You start at 9, 10, and then you don't leave till 1 or 2 in the morning because you're trying to pack everything up. You know, I was used to it. So I didn't mind it as much. And I'm kind of a night owl, so anytime there's like nights, I'm like, oh, it's fine because I can quite easily stay up in the evening.
Yeah.
But yeah, the hours do it does take a while to get used to if you're not used to that sort of thing. But it is easy to get into the swing of things, I find, especially within prep. You kind of get used to having the early mornings, especially if there's tech recce's. Sometimes you have to be up at 5 or 6 to make sure that breakfast is for 7 and stuff like that. You kind of get used to it. And I'm not a morning person best of times, but I knew that's if I needed to be up and I needed to be in the office for 7, I was going to be in the office for 6:45. No question. I wanted to be at work. I was happy to wake up at that time because I wanted to do it. I wanted to learn, and I wanted to make sure everything's ready for the recce's and all that sort of thing. So you do get used to it.
I suppose you just have to adjust, I suppose, don't you?
Yeah.
So tell going forward, it sounds like to me that you've had since finishing your apprenticeship in last July, you've been working non-stop.
Yeah.
And going forward, you have a couple of weeks off now, and you start on Mr Burton.
Yes. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'm presuming it's a drama about Richard Burton.
Yes, it's about his relationship with his teacher, because his teacher adopted him, I believe. So it's about their dynamic, because he was kind of a father figure to him. So I haven't read the script yet, but I hear that it's very good. So I'm excited for when that comes through.
I know you can't disclose too much as well, but
No.
we all know that it's starting because I've seen stuff out, and it sounds. And are you going to be based down in sort of southwest Wales, or?
Yeah, so we're going to be based in Margam Park in Toyneg House, which I've worked in before. I worked there on the way. It is beautiful down Margam Park, especially in the summer.
Oh,
The
I
only
bet.
thing is there's no phone signal, and not great Wi-Fi, but we'll deal with that when it comes. So and there's mice, but I can handle the mice. Just put
Oh,
peanut butter
nice.
everywhere. Yeah,
Oh my God. And
yeah.
and I've heard mention there are bats there as well.
Yes, in the attic. You have to
Fantastic.
have a bat license to go into the attic. I have no idea what that means, but sure. Um, we've got, I think, what else? They've got deer there, so you just have to be careful when you're driving down the dirt path to make sure a deer doesn't run out. Um, but
That's
no, it is,
like working in a zoo.
yeah, yeah. No, but it is really beautiful down there, especially in the summer. So hopefully the weather will be nice for us when we're down there, and because when you're down west, it's so much nicer than being in Cardiff. The weather just
Well,
seems warm. The hot weather seems warmer.
oh yeah, no, hopefully you'll have a lovely summer down there. And what job role are you on, Mr. Burton, Neve?
So I've managed to actually step up now from being a production runner to being a production secretary now.
Oh, fantastic.
So thankfully Bailey got in touch, and she knew that I was looking to step up because we keep in touch, and she was like, I have this job, you interested? And so I gave her a call, and she said it's actually for a production secretary job. And I think a lot of us in that production office are stepping up. I
Oh,
think
fantastic.
one of the runners actually was on Sgil Cymru,
Oh,
um, and he's stepping up to be a runner. The APOC was originally a prod sec, and now she's stepping up to be an APOC. So it's quite nice that we're all kind of in a similar boat. Yeah, I think the runner's name was Jack.
yes,
Um,
yes, I know Jack.
yeah, so
Yeah,
he's going to
fantastic.
be on the job. And we all went out for dinner the other day, and it was lovely just to meet everyone. And
Oh, I bet.
it sounds like it's going to be a really great team.
Fantastic. Well, listen, good luck with everything.
Oh, thank you very much.
And remember to keep in touch with us.
Oh yes, 100%, 100%.
Okay, thank you, Neve.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.